So continuing my series going over all of the major systems of Borderlands 4, we have another pretty big change when compared to previous Borderlands games, and that's the change away from the artifact gear slot, which was in pretty much every previous Borderlands game, now going into the enhancement mod slot that is going to add a ridiculous amount of customization and possibilities when you get into the endgame and start trying to min-max your builds. Now, the enhancement modification slot is replacing the artifact gear slot, meaning this is another piece of gear that can roll all the way up to legendary rarity. And this new slot is going to play really heavily into the licensed parts system for weapons in Borderlands 4. And its main effects are going to be tying directly back into those weapons, depending on what weapon rolls you actually get. So specifically, you'll get an enhancement modification that will buff up a weapon with a specific manufacturer's weapon part on it. And it can have more or less different roles depending on the rarity. So a common rarity would just have its enhancement effect. Uncommon would have 1 bonus stat and the enhancement. Rare would have 2 bonus stats and the enhancement. Epic would have 3 bonus stats and the enhancement. And then legendary would have 2 enhancements and it seems 2 bonus stats, but there may be the possibility that it can get up to 3 bonus stats. I just think it's going to be the 2 bonus stats. Now, as you may have realized, I didn't go over the bonus stats that can roll on this, and that's because they are very simple. They're just pretty basic stat increases. And I think one big issue with the just bonus stats on this item slot specifically is that a majority of those stat rolls you can get are specific to different weapons. So you could have like SMG splash radius or SMG accuracy or SMG crit damage or something like that. So it's kind of very specified to the weapon. And a big issue with that is it very much dilutes the pool. So if you want to use a different weapon, you won't be getting those potentially pretty big buffs. The upside to these type of bonus stats is they can make them much bigger stats because they're only buffing up one specific weapon. So this may be one of the gear slots that you'll have to farm a ton of different ones to get those buffed up bonus stats. But the enhancement effects on these are absolutely ridiculous. So we can take a look at a rare enhancement mod that gives you the high roller enhancement effect, which is weapons with Ripper licensed parts increase weapon damage by 2% for each consecutive shot fired for a max of 25 stacks. So if you have a weapon that has a Ripper license part on it, you just keep getting this weapon damage stacking buff, and when continually shooting the weapon, stacking up to a pretty massive amount, this can give a really big damage increase. And that's one of the more basic ones that's just like a damage increase. It doesn't do anything really unique, but we have other things like the Leaper, which is weapons with Jacob's license parts gain a 40% chance to ricochet non-critical bullets. And this is only a Jacob's license part. Remember, this doesn't require a specific manufacturer weapon, just that it has a licensed part from that manufacturer on it. So you could have a Vladoff weapon with 1 Jacob's part on it and still use this specific enhancement. And this one's pretty crazy because the Jacob's effect is usually that when you crit, it ricochets bullets. Now, non-crits also have a chance to do that as well, which is pretty crazy. And then also looking at the stat rolls on this specific enhancement mod gear piece, this one is epic, so it has 3 rolls. It has critical damage, accuracy, and weapon status effect damage. Now this one didn't roll with any weapon specific buff, but keep in mind we have basically the full list of stats and a vast majority of them are specific to a different weapon. So this gear slot is really targeting weapons specifically. Now we have gotten a look at a couple different legendary enhancement mods and they seem pretty ridiculous because keep in mind everything up to legendary only has the 1 enhancement roll. Legendaries have 2. Their legendary specific roll and another roll that we don't know if it's completely randomly rolled or if the second enhancement is specifically rolled. I don't think we've gotten a confirmation on exactly how that secondary roll is going to work, but the first one was Exploding Boom Puppy. It has Boom Puppy. On kill, weapons with Torque licensed parts have a 50% chance to call down a missile barrage on a nearby enemy. Depending on the damage of this barrage, this thing can be ridiculous. If it has really good damage, you just kill an enemy, it could proc a missile barrage, kill another enemy, proc another missile barrage. So it's just these potentially really strong strong damage procs. The secondary role on this one specifically, again, we don't know if the secondary role can be random or not, is Exploception, which we have seen on a non-legendary enhancement mod, but this is weapons with Torg licensed parts fire stickies that hit for a bonus 50% damage when first attached to an enemy. So this is another damage proc with Torg specific weapons. Obviously this role would be really good because they're both Torg specific enhancement mods, but again, we don't know if that second role could be completely random, or if it would always be something that buffs up Torg licensed parts, or if it's a set role. We don't know yet because we've really only seen a couple legendary enhancement mods. Now, our second legendary enhancement we got to see recently is Pelting Disruptor, and the seemingly legendary role is guns with Ripper licensed parts have a 30% chance to instantly refill the magazine when it is empty, and the secondary role is High Roller. Guns with Ripper licensed parts increase weapon damage by 2% for each consecutive shot fired for a max of 20 stacks. So both pretty strong effects, and based upon the two legendary enhancement mods we've seen, they may both roll the same licensed parts. So this legendary is specific to Rippers. Maybe the second role would always be a Ripper part, but again, I'm not exactly sure on that, because even if your secondary role buffed up a different weapon manufacturer part, that could still work on the same weapon. The only reason I think the secondary role may always follow the manufacturer part as the legendary role is because some of the combinations may be too strong if you were allowed to get different licensed part roles for the buffs on your enhancement mods. Some of them can get really ridiculous, so depending on the different roles, it may be too strong. But again, I've only seen two of these legendary enhancement mods, so that's not really enough to actually see how they specifically roll. And I don't think we've gotten any official information on the specifics of how these can roll or the rules around it. So I think enhancement modifications are actually going to play a very major role in your overall build, because a lot of the buffs they give are really massive, and even just looking past the secondary stats that can be really strong, just the enhancement modification effects on some of these are really crazy and will completely change up how a weapon works. And I think building these in to how your build plays and all the different aspects of your build is going to just take it to the next level if you haven't been doing that previously. And what's also really interesting to think about is that once you get into firmware and get into the end game where different Ultimate Vault Hunter ranks can start giving you different firmware roles, it's going to get even more crazy, because from some of the firmware roles we've already seen, some of them are specifically buffing up licensed parts on weapons. Like one of them, we got to see two of the buffs out of the three on it were buffing up and adding new effects to Hyperion weapon parts. So we may get into a situation you have a legendary enhancement mod that gives two different new effects or buffs to the weapon you're using based on its parts. Then you get firmware roles that could potentially add completely new effects to weapons with those licensed parts as well. And again, firmware roles on all 5 of your non-weapon gear slots, so they do also roll on enhancement mods. But once you get into the end game, you could take firmware off of an item and put it on the item you actually want it on. But that mix of these weapon specific enhancements or effects is gonna be really ridiculous. I already know there's gonna be completely broken effects with some of these combinations. And I am very much of the opinion that this enhancement modification is significantly more interesting than artifact mods were in pretty much every previous Borderlands game. So I think this is just an upgrade compared to what we used to have, and especially in combination with the new license part system, this is just going to give you so many crazy effects. Because again, keep in mind, one of the most important parts about this is that these enhancement effects only need one part on the weapon. So if you say have an epic weapon, it'll have 4 different roles on it. It only needs one of those to get the enhancement modification effect. So the combinations are going to be just crazy. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.